Last time on the 36 Lessons of Vivec Explained, a heavily pregnant Netchman's wife continued to seek out the lands of House Indoril, engaging in far more physical activity than one in her condition should. On her travels, she was visited by a motley bunch of spirits and Daedra. They came to share wisdom with the future glorious invisible warrior poet of Vardenfell, Vivec, gestating within her belly. She was even visited by spirits from as far as Yakuda, who taught the Vivec egg the value of inferring meaning from seemingly meaningless things. Finally, the Netchman's wife was visited by none other than Mafala, who failed to harm little Vec, accidentally revealing some priceless secrets to the warrior poet in the process. Mafala returned the egg to its mother and sealed the rent in her stomach. Unfortunately, the encounter left the Netchman's wife blinded, and she was forced to continue the journey without her eyes. Now that you're up to speed, welcome to Lesson 3. My name is Drew the Daedrologist, and you're watching Dwemer. Come with me on a journey of enlightenment, and I will show you the secret syllable of royalty, as written by the warrior poet himself. Sermon 3 continues right where we left off. The Netchman's wife persevered on her odyssey to the lands of Indoril. Let's dive right in. Being blind, the Netchman's wife wandered into a cave on her way to the domains of House Indoril. It so happened that this cave was a Dwemer stronghold. The Dwemer spied the egg and captured the Netchman's wife. They bound her head to foot and brought her deep within the earth. She heard one say, "Go and make a simulacrum of her and place it back on the surface. For she has something akin to what we have, and so the Velofi will covet it and notice if she is too long away." In the darkness, the Netchman's wife felt great knives try to cut her open. When the knives did not work, the Dwemer used solid sounds. When those did not work, great heat was brought to bear. Nothing was of any use, and the egg of Vivec remained safe within her. A Dwemer said, "Nothing is of any use. We must go and misinterpret this." Vivec felt that his mother was afraid, and so consoled her. "The fire is mine, let it consume thee, and make a secret door at the altar of Padhom, in the house of Boet he are, where we become safe and looked after." This old prayer made the Netchman's wife smile and begin such a deep sleep that when Dwemeri Atronachs returned with cornered spheres and cut her apart, she did not awake and died peacefully. Vivec was removed from her womb and placed within a magical glass for further study. To confound his captors, he channeled his essence into love, an emotion the Dwemer knew nothing about. The egg said, "Love is used not only as a constituent in moods and affairs, but also as the raw material from which relationships produce hour-later exasperations, regrettably fashioned restrictions, riddles laced with affections known only to the loving couple, and looks that linger too long. Love is also an often used ingredient in some transparent verbal and non-verbal transactions where, eventually, it can sometimes be converted to a variety of true devotions, some of which yield tough, insoluble and infusible unions. In its basic form, love supplies approximately 13 drafts of all energy that is derived from relationships. Its role and value in society at large are controversial. The Dwemer were vexed at these words and tried to hide behind their power symbols. They sent their Atronachs to remove the egg image from their cave and place it within the simulacrum they had made of Vivec's mother. A Dwemer said, "We Dwemer are only aspirants to this that the Velofi have. They shall be our doom in this and the 8 known worlds, Nirn, Lorcan, Arket, Thendar, Kinneret, Akat, Mara and Junal. The secret to doom is within this sermon. The ending of the words is Almsavi." Sermon 3 begins with the capture of the Netchman's wife by the historic enemy of the Khyma people, the subterranean deep elves, the heretic Dwemer. The Dwemer spied the egg and captured the Netchman's wife. They bound her head to foot and brought her deep within the earth. She heard one say, "Go and make a simulacrum of her and place it back on the surface, for she has something akin to what we have, and so the Velofi will covet it and notice if she is too long away." If you're familiar with the history of the Dwemer, then you may know the dwarves are not renowned for their hospitality. In other universes, dwarves have a reputation for giving royal welcomes. Their fabled hospitality includes roaring fires, malt beer, red meat off the bone. Unfortunately, as experienced firsthand by the Falmer of Skyrim after the Nords defeated their prince at the Battle of the Mosring Mountains, the Dwemer of the Elder Scrolls are not so genial. The Snow Elves descended into the subterranean cities of the Dwarves and were enslaved. Some say they were even poisoned, hastening their decline into the hunched savages, more akin to goblins than their once glorious elven roots. Combine this indifference towards proper guest etiquette with their iconoclastic neglect for the gods, and the questionable infallibility of said gods, then you can see why their treatment of the Netchman's wife was anything but civil. They sensed the power of Vivec stirring within her womb, and they wished to observe it. The simulacrum they speak of is simply a copy of her, a fake that would deceive the Chimera above. With a simulacrum in place, they could artifice a repository for the Vivec egg, a place to store and study it without the hassle of considering the mother's well-being. The Netchman's wife having something akin to what the Dwemer have is almost certainly a comparison between the growing demigod Vivec and the Numidium. The dwarves believe that the gods do not possess some preeminent power that is beyond their logic and reason. If they can create life in the form of sentient animunculi, then are they not gods? Under the leadership of High Craft Lord Kagranak, the dwarves were building their own god. Similarly, in this story, the Chimera were creating a god in the form of Vivec. One god made from metal and steam, the other from flesh and blood. Little do the two races know, their ability to transcend mortal limitation comes from the same source, the missing god Lorkhan. It's not a topic for today, but I believe, beyond the potency of the heart of Lorkhan, every great feat of Dwemer engineering comes from Lorkhan's power. The geothermal energy emanating from the lava flows beneath the surface of Resdain that the Dwemer tapped to forge their airships, observatories, lighting systems and steam-breathing machines, flowed with Lorkhan's lifeblood, pumped directly from his heart. Why else do you think these constructions continue to function for centuries without maintenance? Anyway, I digress. The Dwemer saw the Vivec egg the same way they saw their own designs. Only their schematics were ink on parchment, calculated equations given form, whereas the Chimera chose genetic codes, biology in place of manufacturing. In the darkness, the Netchman's wife felt great knives try to cut her open. When the knives did not work, the Dwemer used solid sounds. When those did not work, great heat was brought to bear. Nothing was of any use, and the egg of Vivec remained safe within her. The dwarves have always relied on their intelligence when casting doubt on the supremacy of the gods, but in this instance, faced with a meagre Netchman's wife, their tools simply did not work. Vivec's divinity, even in his embryonic state, protected her from their instruments. The Dwemer then turned to their most profound tool, their solid sounds, aka tonal magic. Sound is an essential aspect of magic in the Mundus. The heart of Lorkhan is often called the Doom Drum. The Nords and dragons possess the Storm Voice to engage in battle debates. The Yakudan sword singers make their Shihai spirit blades sing. The warriors of Akavir accentuate their attacks with Ki-Ai. And even the Forgotten House Dagoth have an affinity for music, adorning their shrines with chimes and wielding bell hammers for sacred rituals. All in all, sound has power in the Elder Scrolls universe, and the Dwemer had their own methods for channeling it. With tonal magic, the dwarves carved their immense underground citadels. Tonal magic was employed in mining, medicine, architecture, and much more. It's even said that the tonal architects were so skilled that they could use tonal forces to bend weaker minds to their will, a power that most societies would want to strictly limit. The Dwemer, however, tend to prioritize innovation over morality, so when the dwarves saw that not even their tonal magics could affect the weak, blind, pregnant Netchman's wife, they were understandably humbled by the egg's power. A Dwemer said, "Nothing is of any use. We must go and misinterpret this." Now this is a sentence that we could spend hours trying to interpret. It takes me back to the previous sermon when At-Hator's garments, which were made from implications of meaning, taught Vivec the ability to infer significance in something devoid of detail. It's time for us to infer significance from this sentence, which is also utterly devoid of detail. Of course, anyone, even the wisest of this astute race, is capable of misinterpreting something, but a key facet of misinterpreting is the fact that you do it without realizing. Why would you intentionally misinterpret something? This could simply be an insight into the sense of humour of the dwarves, who are typically presented as a logical, solemn people, or it could be something much more meaningful. The frustrating reality, though, is that the Dwemer are the Elder Scrolls' greatest enigma, so combine that with Vivec's cryptic storytelling, and we may just twist and tie our brains into knots. Vivec felt that his mother was afraid, and so consoled her. "The fire is mine, let it consume thee, and make a secret door at the altar of Padhom, in the house of Boet he are, where we become safe and looked after." The fire is mine. Fire is a metaphor Vivec uses frequently. A lot of Vivec's teachings take inspiration from real-world Hindu spirituality. The Bhagavad Gita is the most revered of Hindu texts, and it tells the myth of Prince Arjuna and his guide, the god of love, Krishna. There are many translations, and to use a word that has become thematic in this episode, many interpretations of the text. But the Gita uses the term fire as a metaphor often throughout. A few examples include, his deeds are purified by the fire of wisdom. It is the spirit itself which is sacrificed in its own fire. Some sacrifice their physical senses in the fire of self-control. Others offer up their contact with external objects in the sacrificial fire of their senses. Others again sacrifice their activities and their vitality in the spiritual fire of self-abnegation, kindled by wisdom. I am the oblation, the sacrifice and the worship. I am the fuel and the chant. I am the butter offered to the fire. I am the fire itself, and I am the act of offering. Without beginning, without middle, and without end, infinite in power, thine arms all embracing, the sun and moon thine eyes, thy face beaming with the fire of sacrifice, flooding the whole universe with light. Like Vivec's sermons, the Gita is cryptic and steeped in metaphor, but we can gather from the words of the god Krishna the significance of fire. In all cases, fire is used to describe the psyche. It hungers for fuel, for the sustenance that is wisdom. And like a fire, the psyche can burn through the weeds of folly and ignorance. Your spirit is a fire, and you must make sacrifices to it. Self-abnegation, to deprive yourself of something for the betterment of the soul fire. Like fasting or rejecting your vices. I'm going to avoid delving too deep into Hindu spirituality, but simply put, Vivec's fire is his transcendental wisdom, through which the Netchaman's wife can make a secret door and take solace. Padhom is the void, the primordial force of chaos and change, and Boethia is one of the strongest Padamaics. The truth is, the Netchaman's wife was about to die, and Vivec knew it. So he showed her his fire. He let her see beyond the confines of mortality, to reassure her that death is not so final in the orbis. The house of Boethia was the perfect place to show her, for it was the Prince of Plots who taught the Kaima how to build houses. It was he who, along with Mafala, showed the Kaima the rules of Sijic endeavour, which is the process of overcoming mortality and becoming gods. It seems as though Vivec rewarded the humble Netchaman's wife for her sacrifice by showing her a glimpse of Kim, the secret syllable of royalty that not even Vivec knew by name yet. This old prayer made the Netchaman's wife smile and begin such a deep sleep that when Dwemeri Atronachs returned with cornered spheres and cut her apart, she did not awake and died peacefully. Vivec was removed from her womb and placed within a magical glass for further study. To confound his captors, he channeled his essence into love, an emotion the Dwemer knew nothing about. Vivec's surrogate mother passed away, and the young Vivec egg was left alone with his captors. He could not walk, nor reach freedom by violence, but he could use the opposite of violence to achieve the same ends, so he used love. Like fire, love is another concept that Vivec uses to encompass far more than its typical meaning. Vivec was torn away from his mother and placed within a fabricated vessel, a perfect example of the cold indifference with which the Dwemer treat others. Vivec claims that the Dwemer have no notion of love, and that's because Vivec has a unique understanding of this emotion, an understanding that comes from duality, from contradiction. The egg said, love is used not only as a constituent in moods and affairs, but also as the raw material from which relationships produce hour-later exasperations, regrettably fashioned restrictions, riddles laced with affections known only to the loving couple, and looks that linger too long. Love is also an often used ingredient in some transparent verbal and non-verbal transactions where, eventually, it can sometimes be converted to a variety of true devotions, some of which yield tough, insoluble and infusible unions. In its basic form, love supplies approximately 13 drafts of all energy that is derived from relationships. Its role and value in society at large are controversial. Love is the coalescence of two parts, the convergence of opposites. The interplay of Anu and Padmé created the universe, and they were diametrically opposing forces. One of light, one of shadow, one of order, one of chaos. Love is a discovery of perfection that can only be achieved through contradiction. But the dwarves, their logic is meticulously calculated. It leaves no margin for error. True love is not measured by an absence of conflict. In fact, conflict is a fundamental ingredient of its chemistry. Hour-later exasperations sound anything but logical, an unexpected shift in mood that sparks a spontaneous argument. Regrettably fashioned restriction sounds like a synonym for marriage. Marriage is a beautiful concept, but it requires limitation. It requires sacrifice, much like the fire we spoke about earlier. Riddles laced with affections. In other words, the love games and inside jokes that are unique to every union and irreplaceable. Looks that linger too long. This, to me, evokes the idea of the conflict between the burning passion you may feel for someone and the inability for your rational mind to let you express it through words. Because some things can only be felt, not confined to language. While love may seem too nebulous to define, there is even a transactional element to it, verbal and non-verbal exchanges between two forces. I guess you could even call it compromise. If you told a dwarf to compromise, to make concessions, perhaps they would not be too acquiescent. These transactions are rewarded with true devotions, for both parties can be reassured that the other has sacrificed a part of themselves in order to strengthen what they share. The result of these perfectly flawed devotions are tough, insoluble, infusible unions, links that are even stronger than dwarven metal. Vivec refers to love's basic form, almost mocking the Dwemer in the process. For love cannot be measured, and no contraption the dwarves can artifice will break bonds forged in love. The Dwemer were vexed at these words, and tried to hide behind their power symbols. They sent their atronachs to remove the egg image from their cave, and place it within the simulacrum they had made of Vivec's mother. The irony is, had the Dwemer been humbled by the egg's words, had they shown their vulnerability in the face of love, perhaps they would have solved the riddle, for their failure would have made the perfect opposing force to coalesce with their flawlessly unassailable logic. They would have found love in the wisdom that comes from the simplest, humblest, bravest of all confessions. I don't know. But alas, the Dwemer hid behind their power symbols, shutting themselves off from that which they could not explain. Vivec's feelings didn't care about the dwarves' facts, and Vivec was set free. A Dwemer said, "We Dwemer are only aspirants to this that the Velothi have. They shall be our doom in this and the 8 known worlds, Nirn, Lorkhan, Arket, Thendar, Kinneret, Akat, Mara and Junal." Alas, this Dwemer had learned something from the encounter, for to be an aspirant is to acknowledge that there is much more to learn. The literal doom of the Dwemer is a story we all know, and we know that the War of the First Council between Chimer and Dwemer, culminating at the Battle of Red Mountain, saw the entire Dwemer race vanish off the face of Nirn. But it's possible the doom he speaks of is not quite so literal. Here the Dwemer see that the Velothi have a living god in the form of Vivec. They aspire to create a god of their own, but this ambition will be their doom, expelling them not only from Nirn, but all the known worlds. Unfortunately, I can't decipher exactly why the Dwemer refer to these specific planets: Nirn, Lorkhan, Arke, Stendar, Kynareth, Akatosh, Mara and Julianos. The Dwemer, with their orreries and star maps, had a greater understanding of the cosmos than any other race on Tamriel, and they would not have recognised the 8 divines of the Imperial Pantheon, nor any other Tamrielic religion. The orrery in Cyrodiil clearly shows Zenithar and Dibella as planets, yet this dwarf omits them. In terms of astronomy, Lorkhan isn't even considered a planet, but rather his sundered body manifests as the 2 moons. But the importance of Lorkhan to Vivec and the Dwemer, and to the mortal realm as a whole, cannot be understated. I guess this is the part where I find love in the wisdom that comes from admitting I don't know. The secret to doom is within this sermon. The secret to doom, both the doom of the Dwemer and the doom of all things, is love. And that is also why Lorkhan's heart is the doom drum. The pursuit of apotheosis will end in doom for the Dwemer and for the Tribunal, and no one knows better the inextricable relationship between doom and love than Lorkhan. As the monomyth states, but when Trinomac and Auriel tried to destroy the heart of Lorkhan, it laughed at them. It said, "This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other." The ending of the words is Almsavi. As always, the ending of the words is Almsavi, the marriage of three ordinary mortals with the immortal power of a god's heart. The most forbidden, profane and glorious display of love. Thank you so much for watching and for coming on this esoteric journey with me. Dwemer is a new channel, and I'm dedicated to seeing it grow so I can continue to tell these stories. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. Please only pledge if you can afford it. I've also started a Discord, so if you'd like to chat to me and anyone else interested in Elder Scrolls, Elden Ring and The Witcher, come join. Thank you so much again. My name's Drew the Daedrologist. You've been watching Dwemer, and I'll see you in the next one.